Good evening, Trump's family. Welcome back to my channel. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless you. Alright, the following is a collection of news from Patriots. Now we will come to today's news. And it looks like the race in Arizona has been called for Katie Hobbs, after a week of counting ballots until they counted to the result they wanted. Of course, the mainstream media went ahead and called the race for Katie Hobbs in Arizona. However, Kari Lake refuses to concede she is going to continue to fight the results of this election. And there's a few pathways that she is utilizing. So let's go and dive into what we have here. And in the States, this here says Western Journal reported Arizona found itself at the center of a national attention on Election Day, thanks to the number of controversies. Specifically, state election officials were criticized for what appeared to be widespread mismanagement of the election process in Maricopa County. According to the election officials, 20% of the voting locations in the county had malfunctioning vote tabulators. That means that was on election day, right? Because of this, lines at voting locations were incredibly long in some cases. Wait times reached well over an hour. Some voters even turned away from voting locations and told to find another. The Western Journal received over 20 exclusive videos featuring Arizona voters explaining how difficult it was for them to cast their ballots. One voter had to wait in line for 7 hours. The same day vote were expected to lead Republican red state Arizona-based journalist Cameron Ark, and said several experts indicated as much. The governor's race between Republican firebrand Kari Lake and not quite so energetic Democrat Katie Hobbs, the current Secretary of State responsible for running Arizona's elections, was a tight one. On Monday, the Associated Press called the race for Hobbs to hold a roughly 20,000 vote advantage over Lake. Despite this, and then source tells the Western Journal that Lake will not be conceding. The Western Journal founder Floyd Brown also suggested as much in a tweet. He said spent hours last night working with Lake team on continuing war for Arizona. She will not go quietly into the night. She intends to fight. And she knew when she entered this race that it would be tough for her opponents like her. Courage. She is fighting for us at Kari Lake. So of course you know exactly how the Democrats are going to respond to this news. Of course, they're going to call her election denier, because she refuses to concede the election to Katie Hobbs, the one who oversold the election to Secretary of State, who was involved in all of these actions that were taking place. The mismanagement of voting equipment in Arizona Maricopa County, and it came to the conclusion that she hoped it would come for her. So that is what she was working for. And it looks like the mainstream media, of course, is siding with Katie Hobbs on this, but we'll see how this thing plays out. I'm absolutely certain Kari Lake will continue to fight this to the very end. And this is some big news. You know, the last 2 elections are changing my perspective entirely. I've spent a whole lot of time trying to educate myself on trends, voter demographics, polling data, polling inaccuracies, all in this effort to be able to have a good grasp and understanding what's happening and where things are going. And I'm at the point where, you know what, it's time to throw it all in the garbage. It means nothing anymore. The polls mean nothing. Likely voter enthusiasm gaps don't mean anything. At least they don't mean anything for Republicans. To a certain extent, there is an element of black pill. I'm starting to get to a point where I'm thinking, I don't know if Republicans are ever going to be able to win big in a general election, unless the shift is so monumental, so massive, that it's an unstoppable force, and it breaks through that Democrat barrier, because that's exactly what I think Democrats have created here. They have fundamentally changed the system, and something major is going to happen, a big change, if Republicans can ever expect to even compete ever again. And I think that's something very important to discuss. And it's probably something that should be discussed on a much wider scale. There should probably be a public discussion on these topics outside of the few independent sources that bring it up. You know, there's one way to describe the results of this election: confusing. It doesn't make sense. Of course, there's the convenient excuse that it's all Donald Trump's fault. Chuck Schumer was just on MSNBC, if I'm not mistaken, might have been CNN, where he said, "Everyone listen to this. Is what is going to be different this time with the MAGA Republicans, because you've said that before, please work with us. Why is it different this time? Why do you feel this time? Because they lost? They all expected to win? The red wave proved and won, if not the main reason, but one of the main reasons for sure, was that average American folks, even those in the middle, even those who tended to be Republicans, said, I'm afraid of this MAGA, they're trying to ruin our democracy. It's not If you look at the numbers, if you look at the results House and Senate, the MAGA Republican way didn't work. The MAGA Republican candidates across the board, you just showed some of them lost. So if you're a good leader of a Republican Party, you say continuing to follow them as a path to disaster. Okay, folks, so it was CNN on Don Lemon's morning show. He claims that there was no red wave, that it was a red mirage, and that it proves that the MAGA Republican way didn't work. The question is, will any Republican way work ever again? You know, to claim that it was a red mirage, I think is highly dishonest. Was it really a mirage? 70% of the American populace being unhappy with the current state of affairs, the majority of Americans blaming Democrats for their problems, especially their economic woes, the majority of American voters trusting Republicans on all of the top issues, the generic ballot favoring Republicans favored to take over the Senate. I mean, Democrats never Trumpers. Everybody was expecting Republicans to take over, so to claim that it was a mirage, I think it's totally bogus, because it wasn't. People were expecting the issues, voter sentiment, voter enthusiasm, everything historically, that would lead to a massive GOP victory wasn't a mirage. It was real. It was there. In fact, it's still there, yet something got in the way. And of course, that something is the Democrat machine. We always talk about discrepancies. Let's talk about discrepancies. Let's look at Florida, which used to be one of the, if not the most important state on the election map. Florida was a purple state. Florida would tell you where the rest of the country was going. Why is it that Republicans won Florida by 20 points on the governor level and nearly 20 points in the senator race, but then other supposedly purple swing states shifted left even in supposedly Republican or MAGA counties? It doesn't make any sense. The question is, what is the main discrepancy? Well, the major discrepancy is obviously the law. Voter laws are different. You know, look at Wisconsin, for instance. The Supreme Court, they're banning mass mail ballots being sent out willy-nilly to millions of voters. They needed to be requested with a legitimate absentee reasoning. In other words, the way things used to be the way things ought to be in Wisconsin, at least in the Senate race, shifted right significantly. Ron Johnson won a decisive victory than in all the other places like Nevada, for instance, which we were expecting Adam Laxalt to win by a good chunk as the late ballots trickle and his lead evaporates. Democrats in some of the most important states have crafted an election system that favors them. And they've crafted a whole strategy around it. I mean, I showed you guys that there were 9,000 recorded votes from the University of Michigan campus. 94% for Democrats. Then we have some data coming out of Arizona State University, essentially showing the exact same thing. 9,000 ballots, 96% for Katie Hobbs, 4% for Kari Lake. And in the past, we would have never seen this before. This didn't exist. This level of high voter turnout from people who aren't informed on the issue is people who aren't tapped into what's going on politically. Now, all the Democrats got to do is promise a bunch of free crap which they cannot deliver on to young, impressionable voters. They just got to get those ballots out to those individuals and get some boots on the ground and target the right places that they need to get those ballots in early. And they don't even need to show up on election day. The whole thing is a disgrace. You know, voting is a privilege. The idea that everyone should participate in elections is ridiculous. If everyone participated in elections, uninformed people and ignorant people, that all parties would just act like the Democrats, it wouldn't be about actually winning on the issues and having good policies. It would be how much unrealistic promises can you market to the masses and a transactional process to get people's votes who aren't paying attention. Does that sound like a great election system? Does that sound like something that works? All the early ballots and early voting? Meanwhile, the Biden administration promising $10,000 in student loan relief. Vote for us, we'll give you 10 grand essentially. You then see what happens. Voter turnout supposedly searches for youth voters who are buying into the scam, and then they get scammed. Biden student loan relief program has already been officially halted and blocked. The system is unsustainable, it's untrustworthy. And it's causing something very dark and ominous as people lose trust in the system. It's making people lose faith in democracy. I mean, we're talking about something so deeply corrosive and toxic. I mean, what a swell democracy that the Democrats are creating a system that's going to lead to perpetual Democrat victory. Does that sound like democracy to you? I mean, even looking at the youth vote from these universities, 94–96% voting for one particular party, that's crazy. Any demographic that votes that deeply for one political party, it seems more like cult behavior than it does democracy in action. And clearly, Democrats have embraced this system while Republicans have rejected it. You know, before Election Day, we saw that little moment with Sunny Hostin on The View. I'm not going to play the clip for reasons, but some of you guys are probably aware of it, the little incident with Sunny Hostin accidentally telling the truth about voting for her son. And again, it adds to the skepticism, which is not a good thing. You know, I think the hope in 2022 was to sort of restore faith in the system to see a massive GOP victory, which made sense based on the data and historically, and instead, the opposite happened. And that's a very bad result for how people feel. I mean, even with the Republicans winning the generic House vote significantly, they barely picked up any seats, and they continued to lose seats as the week went on. And then you think about how Democrats won every single Democrat toss-up race, there were over 30 of them, Democrats won every single one 100% of them, and probably one of the least favorable Democrat election environments in modern history. If that's the case, it makes you think, again, that little bug at the back of my mind, can Republicans ever win again? I mean, how bad do things have to be for Republicans to now score an election victory after the pandemic and all the changes? The laws were made in particular states, which of course, they said those laws were emergency laws, and emergency measures be due to the pandemic, if they still exist? Of course, I doubt Democrats are ever going to let go of them. But after that, the question is, how are Republicans ever going to win? Again, there needs to be a conversation about these topics. Clearly what's happening is unsustainable and makes no sense. And again, you guys know me, I am the eternal optimist. When it comes to this stuff, I try to always look forward, and if it's gotten me to the point where I'm almost to the extent of being black-pilled and the question is, what does that mean moving forward? Given the current system, can the Democrats ever be stopped? Is it even possible, especially with the incompetent Republican leadership? I feel like what we saw in Florida represented how people felt, but for some very odd reason. We only saw it in Florida, and I wonder why that is. Thank you very much. WWG1WGA. Give me your thoughts below.